Okay, thank you very much. I'd like to note that the board convened an executive session to consider matters regarding proposed, pending, or current litigation and collective negotiations pursuant to Article 14 of the Civil Service Law, the Taylor Law. We would like to start our meeting by asking everyone to please rise, and we'll say the pledge. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States, to the republic, stands one nation, indivisible. I want to thank everyone for being able to come tonight. The rain is certainly an impediment, but no one's missing a Yankee game. It's exciting, at least to me. We will now begin. Chris, I'm going to have you lead the recognition.
We can go down to the floor. I know we're in a new space. Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you, Mr. Lemler. Thank you, our students, for being here. It's always very special. This is our first student recognition presentation for the year. We have some very special students here with us this evening to recognize their status as National Merit Commended Students. Congratulations to Ethan Fictel, Maya Akawa, Annette Park, and Jack Potter, who were recognized for exceptional academic promise as commended students in the 2023 National Merit Scholarship Program. Commended students placed among the top 50,000 students who entered the 2023 competition by taking the 2021 preliminary SAT National Merit Scholarship Qualifying Test, PSAT, MSQT. Those being named commended students have demonstrated outstanding potential for academic success, commented a spokesperson for the National Merit Scholarship Corporation. These students represent a valuable national resource, recognizing their accomplishments, as well as the key role their schools play in their academic development, is vital to the advancement of educational excellence in our nation. We hope that this recognition will help broaden their educational opportunities and encourage them as they continue their pursuit of academic success. Mr. Dan Doherty, Director of Counseling, said beyond their test scores, they are leaders amongst their peers, high-achieving students and accomplished musicians and athletes. Go North Shore, go. We are so proud of their accomplishments both in and outside of the classroom and look forward to hearing about all of their future successes. So we're going to call you students up now one by one and give you a certificate and, of course, the North Shore pen. So thank you again for being here and congratulations. First up, Ethan Fictel. Maya Akawa. Annette Park. Jack Potter.
want to congratulate those students again. Really, really great work. And also congratulate the parents as well. It's a kid's achievement, but we know they're, it's a family effort. So thanks, everyone. We would then move on to our first order of business for tonight, other than that recognition, which is the approval of our minutes from the board meeting of September 22nd. Is there a motion? And I heard a second as well. Questions or comments?
I have a comment.
Please.
I would like to make an addition at page 11, where we were discussing the appointment of members to the audit committee. There's a paragraph beginning with trustee Russo said she agreed. I had wanted to add a couple of sentences to that because we had other provisions where examples were given by people about you know, their experiences. And I gave an example for my position on that. So I had wanted to put in trustee Russo provided the example where a civic group, North Shore Reform Group, hosted a meeting of state, county, and local legislators with the community. A member of the civic group, Vito Palmieri, later became a member of the Legislative Action Committee and assisted LAC in organizing its first legislative night. I think it's important, and I would appreciate it if we added it to the minute. So I'm making a motion to add. I've sent the wording to Betty ahead of time because I know it's long, so that she would have it.
Is there a second to the motion? Okay, and now we would discuss the motion, and then have a discussion of the motion, take a vote on the motion, and then return to the discussion of the minutes as a whole. So any questions or comments on the motion to add that language? I've seen the language in advance, but I think other folks are hearing it now for the first time.
And what and tell us
Oh, yeah,
why
I
it's
can-
important.
As best I could, several drafts of it. Trustee Russo provided the example where a civic group, North Shore Reform Group, hosted a meeting of the state, county, and local legislators with the community. A member of that civic group, Vito Palmieri, later became a member of the Legislative Action Committee and assisted LAC in organizing its first legislative night. Because
Its relevance.
it's relevant because it was an example of where where ideas that came from community groups that people viewed as not being consistent with the board, that where people who were perceived as being oppositional, which I would question that, but that was the perception, that good ideas come from people who maybe don't share our point of view or the board's point of view. And that was really part of the point I made. Other people gave examples of their experiences. That was my experience that I lived through in, I think it was 2013, where where the first legislative night was organized by a civic group. And that later has become very important to LAC's function. And that member of the community, member of that group, later became a member of LAC. In fact, at that time, we increased the size of LAC to allow to get these people involved in, in the community. He and another person that had nothing to do with that group. So I don't really want to confuse the issue, confound the issue. But I think it's an important example where people who maybe there are views of them that are not, that I think are, well, the views were incorrect, but it's an example of what I was saying, that sometimes people who we perceive as not, that good ideas come from different sectors of the community, and that would be a different sector of the community than a board member or someone who served on board committees. That it's important to bring in everyone's ideas, because for me, I think when you have people with differing ideas, you can often come out with a, a better product, right? Because they have a different perspective. So the importance of the example was this was a group that were perceived as having a different perspective from the board. And something really good came out of that that we have now incorporated into what we consider an important board subcommittee. And I think it's an important example to include.
Actually, really appreciate that, but it wasn't what I meant just in terms of my question, but it's useful. Thank you. I was just, you said you wanted to put it in because others had similar examples or had
No, well,
also.
I want to put it in because I want to put it in mostly because I feel it's really important.
Okay.
It's what I said.
Okay.
I feel it's important. I think it's an example of what I said. And my only point was that later on in the minutes, I know Betty doesn't take things down word for word, but there are other instances where examples were given
I was
of
looking
people's
for.
experience.
Okay.
But the really important is not what other people did. The important thing is, I think it's a concrete example where differing people with differing perspectives have brought a significant contribution to the Board of Education.
Or comments or thoughts on this? Sorry, did I cut someone off? No, Andy. Okay. So the paragraph as it currently reads is trustee Russo said she agreed with trustee Galati that there was a large pool of applicants and her vote is not reflective of the quality of those selected. She noted that there are good ideas in the community that come from people who have different opinions, and she feels the board should engage people from all areas of the community to make everyone feel included, which I think summarizes a lot of those points. And I guess, while I agree with you that, first of all, I agree with the premise, of course. Well, I agree with part of the premise. I agree with the premise that different opinions make better decisions. But I don't think anyone who watches this board thinks that we're of a single mind on anything. So I think there's difference of opinion on this board, and that's been reflected in our votes and our discussions. But nevertheless, to me, it's more of a process issue. I think when you look up what minutes are supposed to be, they're not the details. They're not specific examples. They are summary approaches to be able to give the gist of what happened. But for the actual detail, which is important detail, and I understood why you had brought it up. I think it was a valid point in the conversation. But for the verbatim detail, that's why we have the video and the live stream for every detail that's put in there.
It's not verbatim. It's an example. And if you read the minutes later on, you talk about how you weren't picked the first time for LAC. Lisa talks about how she wasn't picked the first time for LAC. This is no different than that in the minutes. This is an example of where someone came up with a great idea that was not necessarily part of the board hierarchy. It was someone from outside that actually that group was held in disdain by the board at the time, but I don't really want to go into that. My only point is that that's a solid example. I feel it's important to me that it's included in the minutes. I don't think it takes anything away from the minutes. It's not saying that the minutes are incorrect. I'm asking it to be included, and I don't think it's such a big deal to include the example.
I'll just say I just came off the NISBA training and they had a whole conversation about minutes and that different schools do it differently. I'm sure Betty is more of an expert on this. And there was an example that came up. What do you do when someone wants to add something in the minutes? And one suggestion that they gave is to put in the minutes the time in which the statement was said. So people can go back to the video to record it. And they talked a lot that often is a good compromise for people and still sticks with the sort of the procedure that should be followed with minutes not being a script of conversations.
It's not a script of the conversations, what I'm suggesting. It's literally 2 sentences.
Are there any other comments or thoughts before we take a vote on the specific amendment? I want to let Rich go because he hasn't voted.
Sure.
Okay. I think that if a trustee feels strongly about having something put into the text of the minutes that isn't quote unquote inappropriate and is reflective of what the trustee felt at that particular point in time, I don't see why that would present a problem. It's not as if everybody's saying, well, I said this and I said that and I want this added and I want that added. That's not the situation, and this happens rarely. And there have been cases in the past where I asked and I was told similarly, and my feeling at the time was, okay, I'm all right. But if you go back a couple of years, our minutes were much more detailed in terms of trustee X said this and trustee Y said that. So yes, we have evolved from that, we've changed. But in this particular case, because one of the trustees feels strongly about it and it's not pejorative in any way, I don't see why it's a problem.
Maria?
I actually think what's in here is stronger than what you're adding, so I don't have a strong feeling about it if you feel that strongly about it. But I rather like the idea that we refer to the video, because it does reinforce the fact that this isn't, our minutes aren't really meant to be, and I know you're not implying this, but our minutes aren't meant to be a transcription of everything we say, right? That's one great reason to have the video of the live stream. I've actually often looked at the minutes myself and wished something I said had been recorded and thought, oh, well, it's out there. It can be reviewed. So, I don't feel really strongly one way or the other, but I think it would be a great compromise to go with what is it a NISBA suggestion? Yeah.
Can I ask a question? I feel like Maria, I don't feel very strongly one way or the other. I do think that the gist of what you said, what Trustee Russo said was captured, but I understand why more specifics are being requested. But I am wondering, the one thing that makes me a little uncomfortable, and maybe we've done this in the past, is just the use of a community member's name in that specific.
You could take his name out. I don't care. I mean, the point is that that bringing in different people often bring a better product. And in here, it actually is one of the essential roles. Sometimes the biggest thing that LAC does every year is this legislative night. And it never would have happened but for this group hosting the legislative night. That's my point. And I don't often ask. There were plenty of times I would have liked to have added something to the minutes. I don't often ask. I'm asking now. It's literally 2 sentences. Can't even believe that it's such a big deal just to add it in. I
Brianna,
really
it's
can't.
not. I don't mean to. I'm sorry to interrupt, but I don't think it's a big deal. I think we're just, everybody's trying to make sure we're following our rules. That's all. But I think I think you, as I said, I think it's very strong as it's stated. But you want to add that sentence, and you'd be willing to take the community member's name out at the end of what's already that paragraph.
Well, it's sort of in the middle.
I mean,
but
the paragraph that starts with trustee.
And I'm not
Russo
saying
said.
that Betty's didn't capture what I was saying. She absolutely did capture the essence of what I was saying.
Right.
I just think it's important for the community to have a concrete example. I am one of the few people who have been actively participating in the community for a very long time that sits on the board. I mean, Rich has me beaten by a long shot, but there's not many of us who have been. I mean, I've been volunteering in this community over 20 years, and I've been living here almost 30. So, there's a lot of history that I think people forget. And I think this is an important piece of history when we're talking about this particular topic.
Other thoughts? I think we have covered this topic well. I think for me, the minutes aren't broke, so I'm not sure we should be fixing them at this point. I think what we should do is take a vote on the specific motion as worded with the person's name in there. And then if we want to make another motion on an amended version of that, just to keep it clean, we should do that. So I'll call the vote on the motion with the community member's name in it. All in support of including it in that form, say aye. All opposed?
Well, I
Sorry.
was aye on that. I mean, I'm not gonna hold out for that, but I don't want anyone, I
Well, sure,
don't
so
think,
I
I don't want to
assume
vote no on my own.
You'd be an aye,
um,
sure. Sure. Do we have all the votes, Betty? Okay, and so that was 2-5? Okay, so now we're still in discussion. We can entertain a new motion that would have to get pretty specific wording if you want to do it on the fly and just,
I have it. I mean, it's the same wording. You could take the at the second sentence, it's trustee Russo provided the example, or a civic group, North Shore Reform Group, if you want, hosted a meeting of the state, county, and local legislators with the community. A member of that civic group later became a member of the Legislative Action Committee and assisted LAC in organizing its first legislative night.
hold on, so that, there's a motion to put that in there, and we need a second on the motion.
Second,
Okay,
well,
comments or questions on this? All in favor?
I
Aye.
thank you.
There we go. Okay. We will now move on to action item, oh, sorry, I apologize. So that's the amendment to the minutes. We still have to vote on the actual minutes. Any questions or comments on the entirety of the minutes with this amendment now addended? No, and obviously, you know, Marianne is in agreement with all of us that Betty's work is terrific.
No reflection. I think I said that on
Exactly,
Betty's
exactly,
work.
exactly.
It was just my thing.
Public has seen one of the lesser topics that we're going to have to deal with in our time up here, but we do take them all. I will call the vote on the approval of the minutes in their entirety. All in favor? Aye. Thank you, everyone. We will now move on to action item 5, which is acceptance of the claims audit report for August of 2022. Is there a motion and a second? Any comments or questions? I just had a question. There was the bank check sequencing had changed, and there was a footnote that there was a change in banks. I just wanted to confirm that, what that was. I'm sorry, Jamie, just for the, it's all right.
My apologies. We, in July, there was a switch, and I believe it was part of the board reorganization meeting to add TD Bank to our list of financial institutions, and the switch was between Citibank and TD Bank, and that's why the check series changed with the change of bank.
Which is, I believe, departed their Seacliff location. Yeah, I think they have. Okay, any other questions on the claims audit? All in favor? Aye. Action item 6, which is approval of budget transfers in the amount of $221,000 to cover transportation for St. Christopher's students. Is there a motion
Shin.
and a second? Comments or questions?
I have a comment. I just want to remind everyone that the district has an obligation to educate and transport the residents of St. Christopher's, but we are then reimbursed, not in the same year generally, but we are reimbursed. So that $221,000 that's being expended as a budget transfer, we will later get reimbursed from, it's usually New York City.
I was just going to make a comment. I know we have a maximum of 6 that they can do. What does this bring us to? And how many did we originally budget for?
We budgeted for 2. I think this brings us to 4, and there's one potential, another one coming, I believe.
So there's still room. And then a follow-up question is, we took the money out of certain lines to cover this. We, of course, as Marianne stated, will get reimbursed. Does that reimbursement go into general fund, or do we directly bullet it back to the lines from which it was pulled?
It comes back in the form of a revenue to the general fund.
So theoretically, if we don't need to replenish those lines from which it was taken, and I assume based on the fact that this is October, we have the whole year in front of us, but even with that landscape, you've decided, or at least made a judgment call, that we may not need those lines. So that would be the first example that we're literally approving that might represent some of the underspending that we've been talking about for this year's budget.
That is correct. The codes chosen were based on looking forward and seeing that we hopefully wouldn't need that money on those codes and utilize it that way.
The goal could that could be then fund balance to apply to next year. Right. All right, terrific. Any other questions on this?
Just a procedural one, although that That was great to have explained. Thank you. If in the hoped for unlikely case where we did need it back in the original place, this would be an example of another budget transfer.
We would add back to whichever
Right.
account we needed, looking then at other accounts as the year goes on where there may be flexibility and replenish that accordingly.
Thank you. Other comments? All in favor of the budget transfer? Aye. Action item 7, which is a resolution regarding a revenue budget adjustment. I'll take a motion. And then a second, thank you. Comments or questions?
Do have a question. Actually, it's a procedural question. All right. So I initially voted no on this tax levy because I thought we should put more fund balance to offset the tax levy in the first year where I personally felt a big drop, but I think some people did, a big increase in their taxes. When I don't have a problem with the resolution, but I guess the vote still has to be no because it has to be, I'm not voting no. The resolution is what we actually did. I didn't vote in favor of the 500,000 because I thought there should be a greater amount put forward. So does that then make my vote on the resolution a no? That's, yeah, it's technical.
Yeah, and actually, we did think of this because it really is an accounting resolution. Maybe Jamie, you could explain a little bit more, and that might help.
Because those lines are being utilized, you have to make it. It's an excellent question because it does, the two do kind of go hand in hand, but this is just the adjustment of the books for what was decided by the resolution of that night too. So it doesn't change your I don't believe it changes your decision on that evening. Or your
Yeah,
vote
the
on that
August
evening.
3rd vote will
But
still be
it's-
recorded in a way, it doesn't.
I know the August 3rd vote will still be recorded, but it's kind of a weird context because you're not getting, the vote is in my, like it's out of context, right? So when I voted no in August, I guess it was August, I voted no because I thought we should use more money to offset the tax levy, not because I thought the tax levy was incorrect, right? And I wouldn't vote no because I think the resolution is incorrect, but just because I thought we should put more money in the first year. Right, yeah.
Let me
So
just
it's
clarify.
weird.
Let me clarify to what we're all talking about here. Essentially, let's see if I can do this in a succinct but helpful way. Essentially, because of the settlement between Nassau County and LIPA, the way that LIPA would be contributing revenue to the district was no longer in the form of taxes. It was in the form of a new payment called a direct payment. That direct payment necessitated the lowering of our tax levy that we would collect from the community. If we didn't change that tax levy, as is our legal requirement to do as a board, then we would have likely gone with the same levy that was estimated to be in place at the time of the budget vote, which would have been very rough numbers, $8.5 to $9 million more than we needed to collect, and that would have been passed along to all the remaining taxpayers after LIPA was gone, which would have been a huge jump in everyone's taxes, everyone. It would have been a lot more money for the district, but that would have not been the right thing to do. So we had to lower the tax levy. The part that Mary Ann mentioned, she said fund balance. I think you meant you wanted to use more of the settlement money.
For the settlement money,
Is that as
or fund, it doesn't make a difference,
Well,
wherever it comes from,
yeah,
but
well,
the settlement money,
yeah.
The 3.25 million, we got 3.25 million, not all now.
correct?
But we
yeah.
received 2 million, we're receiving 2 million this year. We decided to use 500,000 of that,
Yeah, but let me just go back because I want to keep
yeah.
even if it's just in my head that I'm keeping it straight. So what we knew we had to lower it by that $8.5 to $9 million. Then in a separate deal, the one that we as a district were able to consummate with LIPA to resolve our third party beneficiary suit, We settled for $3.25 million, of which we received $2 million in the first year. And the discussion to which Marianne is referring and Jamie is referring was how much of that to use right away. And we had a very long conversation. I thought it was actually a great example of this board showing our differences of opinion and having different thoughts about how much to use. And we had some folks who wanted to use none, some folks who wanted to use up to $1 million, and we settled on that $500,000 amount to further offset the taxes, leaving $1.5 million for future years when we're going to be experiencing additional drops. However, that was all done in real time. We didn't know going in how much we were going to use. So we made a resolution to establish the tax levy, which was then sent to the county, which then levied the taxes by their own formula with their, I'll just stop there with their approach. They go and do that. But the wording that we used on that night, I believe we wanted to clarify with this resolution. So my understanding is this resolution, Marion, obviously, as always, we all can vote however we think is best. But to me, the reading of this resolution is that it says, whereas this already happened, here's just some clarifying legalese to make sure it's all exactly the way it has to be.
Exactly. And it was after a conversation that Mr. Pappas had with our external auditor about how to resolve that from an accounting perspective.
Questions or comments on this resolution? Okay, I will call the vote. All in favor of this resolution regarding the revenue budget adjustment, say aye. Aye. Thank you. Is it 7? All right, thanks, everyone. We will now move on to item 8, the report of our superintendent, Dr. Zublionis.
Good evening, everyone. Great to see everyone. And it was great to see so many of you on Saturday, October 8th for our homecoming. We had a great day and a great turnout. Our home games and all of our athletic events have really produced a really high amount of turnout, and it's been great to see. And we look forward to that with our concerts coming up in the winter, and we're going to be there before you know it. But I really want to give a tremendous amount of thanks to Rachel Bowen, who's kind of our spearheader for the homecoming committee. We had a very small homecoming committee this year. Of course, the heads of our parent organizations, and we're looking forward to starting the planning even earlier for next year so we can add. And that's a great place to be, given where we've been the last few years, thinking about expanding and making even more engaging, bringing even more students in. But it was a terrific day, a Viking win, which is always good. And we also had some music and the clinics for the younger students, which is a great hit. And we're going to continue to build on that in homecoming and in other areas. So thank you all for being there. A great day. Part of what we did in leading up to that event was something new that Ms. Bowen had suggested, and the committee got around. That was what we're calling the Varsity Viking Walk. We've been doing the graduate walk for the last few years, where the seniors who went to that elementary school on the day of graduation come and walk through the school. So selfishly, I always love that, to see my old students that in this case I knew since second grade. And I went to see Cliff. Dr. Smythe was at Glenwood Landing, and we had folks at Glenhead School too, and they went to the 3 elementary schools. And it was really terrific. They were talking to the younger students. They were in their uniforms, and it was just very special. So it was a great example of Viking innovation that we did kind of a week before and got it done. So thank you to Don Lang and our elementary principals and our secondary principals as well. And that's a great segue to October being National Principals Month. And as I call them, our Fab Five, our amazing 5 principals, been doing great work this year to have a terrific opening, and been doing great work to kind of shift back to normal, to instructional leadership. And I'm just so happy to be able to partner with him, Mr. Pappas, Dr. Smythe, in this new role. And be in the buildings with them. They're really doing terrific work. So happy National Principals Month to our principals. And also a special thank you to our custodians. Custodial Recognition Day was October 2nd. I just want to thank our custodians for all the work that they did, even though every time I say Mr. Bortzel, I preface that with saying, are you still talking to me, Jerry? Because of everything that he's undergone through construction, and even during homecoming, he does so much. And our full custodial team is at homecoming, so they did so much for the day. We have a great picture of him, Ms. Newman has it, of them on the train that we had for the kids. So we got to get that picture on the website. So thank you to our custodians for everything they do. Even tonight, they were very helpful in getting this night going. We're working with Jerry T here to get the lights right. So thank you all. I want to say another thank you to our high school team. We ran the PSAT yesterday at the high school. For several years, we've been doing it during the school day on a Wednesday. And the question then is, when you're testing all of the sophomores and juniors, what do you do with the other students? What do you do with the freshmen and seniors? And so our directors, our director of English and Mr. Doherty, our director of counseling, Mr. Contreras, certainly, Dr. Kurst, Ms. Imperial worked out a schedule so that we didn't lose an instructional day for those other students. It was a big challenge. Dr. Smythe, Mr. Contreras, and I and Mr. Doherty were in our office for a few hours trying to work out all the kinks. And they did a great job, and the custodians really made that possible as well. One thing we've talked about is moving the PSAT back to the weekends in the future, and we'll talk about that with the board as we set the school calendar. Most other districts do that, and it would preserve that instructional day. We got it done this year, but it is hard to do. So we're going to look to that for the future. One thing that I did want to bring up is a question about fund balance, and that was brought up in it's either new business or old business discussion at our last meeting, which was 3 weeks ago. We had a little bit of a gap there. And so Mr. Pappas was talking about our reserve amount when he originally answered. And so the full fund balance, including restricted reserves, assigned fund balance, and unassigned balance, fund balance right now is $21,744,108. Thank you, Mr. Pappas, who went back in and did a comparative report over the last few years, which shows that we've used $2.68 million towards this year's budget in appropriated fund balance. Then we have unappropriated fund balance of $1.2 million. That's in outstanding encumbrances that will be paid. So we'd be happy as part of our budget boot camps, and of certainly the community budget forum will be talking about reserves as a big part of our picture, along with our board discussion, certainly the one on November 10th when we talk about our budget planning. So thank you again, Mr. Pappas. As Mr. Ledmore referred to, and several of us have, we know that property taxes have come in, and certainly last week, and I'm sure into this week. And Mr. Pappas and I will have another meeting talking about the connection between what happened with LIPA and Nassau County and what happened with your personal property taxes, the school portions. So we'll be at Seacliff School at 7 o'clock on the 20th, doing kind of a repeat of the meeting that we did last Thursday here. Originally, the location was central office. We think we might have a bit of a turnout, so we're going to just move across the street. I'll post a sign, and we'll also message that out. Mr. Pappas and I are also going to produce a short asynchronous video to really break this down. There are so many working parts, not only in the LIPA deal, but then also in how the county is rolling out its reassessment plan that started in 2021. And you'll see, and we were looking at individual property taxes inside and outside of the district, seeing individual jumps, decreases, increases that were bigger than last year, smaller than last year. And so how that taxable assessed value goes up. And we'll get into this in our meeting and in our asynchronous video, but it's very diverse. Of course, that's on top of all the other factors with the school levy and the LIPA shift. So we look forward to talking about that more at that meeting and creating that resource. Just a couple other items I wanted to mention. I wanted to thank Mr. Gordon for what I called with him on the phone yesterday, Gordon University. He's had 2 parent universities over the last couple of weeks, one for high school, the Seal of Civic Readiness, which is a new program similar to the Seal of Biliteracy. As a former social studies teacher, I love this. It's recognizing students who have taken courses and done work outside of school to show their citizenship readiness. So it's really great. He also had a program this week on Monday on National History Day, and that was for middle schoolers, and that's becoming an assured experience at the middle school. So thank you, Mr. Gordon and Dr. Smythe, for your support. And we have another parent university, we're on a roll, on Monday, October 17th, called The Science of Stress. So we encourage you all to come. It's at 7 o'clock in the middle school library. And Dr. Smythe did send out a message, and we'll continue to message that out as a reminder. We also have our Viking Community Committee on Tuesday, the 18th, and they'll be meeting in their task-centered subcommittees, working on different focus areas. And tonight we're going to be speaking about our North Shore journey, which is kind of a reorganization of our strategic plan. And part of what we will be doing is creating listening stakeholder groups going forward, and kind of akin to what we did when we first formed the strategic plan. So the strategic plan is ending. We're going to try and mirror what we did in the beginning as we assess where we are, where we should perhaps continue to go with the board's consideration. So thank you all for being here tonight, and looking forward to a great meeting and a great rest of the week.
Dr. Z, just gonna put a plug in. The meeting here last Thursday, was a great presentation about the whole LIPA picture, the tax picture. I had a nice crowd, and a crowd of various members of the community, which I thought was really great. It was interactive, and I encourage everyone, if you weren't able to be there for that, and you have any interest, which everyone should, please show up. And I'm sorry, Seacliff Auditorium,
That's right. Yes, that's a location change. Yep.
and 1020, easy to remember. All right, thank you. We'll now move on to the report from our SGO reps, and I thought they weren't here, but I'm realizing there are possibly two just generally interested high school students, or maybe our actual reps. But you guys can come up, I think. Yeah, you can come up on those steps, and yeah, I mean, if you want, you can give it from the podium today because you're already down there. But in the future, you can come up here. You can either way. Let me introduce you as well, and just and we appreciate you here. It's Michael Fleming and Samantha Lockwood. Really appreciate you being here, and I think we'll give you a round of applause from the beginning because we're excited. So now that we're applauding, we should also let you know you have big shoes to fill. We've never been disappointed by our student reps, and I'm sure you guys are up to the task. So we're glad to have you here. It's always a highlight of our meetings to hear you. Generally, you're always welcome to sit at the podium, but I would also say to recognize that senior year still counts. So after you give your presentation, you're always welcome to stay, as any member of the community is, but you're also welcome to head home and get to work or get some sleep, whatever you're doing. But welcome. We'd love to hear what you guys have to say. You just start talking.
All right, so past week was homecoming week, which was exciting. We had a great game. During the week, we did a spirit week for the students. We had Monday was Pink Day, Tuesday was USA Day, Wednesday we had no school, obviously. Thursday was Character Day, and Friday was Maroon and White Day. Great school spirit amongst the students. It was great turnout. A lot of people had costumes. A lot of people showed their school spirit, which was great. Friday we had pep rally inside for the first time since I think 2019, which is great. A lot of people were there. A lot of people enjoyed it. The atmosphere was great. We had cage volleyball for the kids. We had homecoming royals. It was great, and then great student turnout the game on the weekend, and great win. That's pretty much it.
Thank you.
Also, to keep school spirit up, we plan to incorporate like school spirit days throughout the year to keep like school spirit high, which just mean be good students. So yeah, that's it.
Being back in person, obviously, for both this event, but for all of it, I'm sure has been a welcome change.
Yeah, it was nice, and it's like getting back to what it was pre-COVID, which is great always. So yeah.
Terrific. Thank you.
All right, yep.
Thank you guys.
Thank you.
All right, and with that, we will go. We will move on to a presentation from Dr. Zublionis and Smythe, I believe. I put this together. The North Shore Journey. You want us to go down there?
You can. I did give you printed copies, so you don't have to. I am turning on the projector. I think it will block it, so it's not shining on you. But up to you.
Get started, and if we have to move, we'll move.
Okay. Yeah. I'm trying to think of ways where you don't have to move. It's the little things. Hello again. I just want to take a minute to thank Mr. K for all the support at our board meetings, all the setup. We're talking throughout the week, and so thank you, Elliot, for everything you do. Tonight, I wanted to speak to you about the North Shore Journey, which is our revisiting of the North Shore Strategic Plan. And as we've said many times in prior years, we needed to revisit the strategic plan because in the middle of the term of the strategic plan, the world changed on us and many new demands and many new challenges arose that don't necessarily change the plan, but need to, I think, warrant our changing our approach to it. And as you know, the plan was until 2023, so we're in our last year of the plan, and we wanted to talk about how we're approaching measuring our progress, looking at the actions, maybe reorganizing our approach so we capture student voice and make sure that we're doing everything that we need to do. The 2018-2023 strategic plan had three basic pillars: teaching and learning, equity for all learners, and social emotional learning. Just a reminder of the process, we had a large group of stakeholders involved. It actually began the year before, in the 2017-2018 school year. We had over 2,600 stakeholders respond to surveys, and that included parents, teachers, students, and community members. We had a community forum, and we had interviews across those stakeholder groups as well. From there, Dr. Gio Rizzo at the time and the board established a core planning team in the spring of 2018, and that included 38 members from the community. It was facilitated by Dr. Judy Wilson, who's a retired superintendent from Princeton, New Jersey, who we're going to talk about our tri-state visit last year, and she actually led the tri-state visit in March of 2022, as luck would have it. And it was really interesting because the visit was on the revisiting of the strategic plan that she had indeed built with us. From there, and we still have what I call the North Shore scrolls, the scrolls of notes and information from those strategic planning meetings in 2018, synthesized data and set goals. In the spring and summer of 2018, the district appointed administrators to head each of the three pillars and to create timelines for specific actions and create the final document. And this is very dense text, but really just to show you, these are the pieces of the final document. We think that, part of the most important part of this, yes, are the specific actions, but also the larger goals that were framed out of the strategic plan. And as we show the evolution into what we're proposing, we step into in this final year, you'll see a lot of that same language in the bigger goals. Together, we will build a contemporary learning environment that inspires and reflects the natural delight and curiosity of our K-12 learners, where student voice and ownership of learning are fostered and empowered through individual choice, active engagement, and purposeful challenge. The other thing I think you hear when we read that goal is a lot of our mission statement, which has been with us as a district for many years. Equity for all learners, the overall goal statement. Given that a culture of connection and a sense of belonging are foundations for a healthy school community, we will build a safe environment that emphasizes acceptance, equity, inclusivity, cultural competency, and a respectful open exchange of ideas for all learners. Again, you see the connection to the world today and the necessity of those schools to lead a successful and harmonious life. And finally, social emotional learning. We will enact the development of students' social and emotional well-being by teaching self-awareness, self-management, social awareness, relationship skills, and reflective, responsible decision-making within a nurturing environment, and several action items within each of those pillars. And you can see the number of goals. One thing that we faced as we're beginning to implement this plan were the organizing of committees. And the district had established a committee for each of the pillars, teaching and learning, which I was involved in at the time as principal of Seacliff School and then assistant superintendent for instruction. Dr. Smythe and other administrators, teachers, and parents and students were involved in that committee. The Equity Committee, which was headed by Anna Aguiar, who's our Director of World Languages and E&L, and then our Social Emotional Learning Committee, which was headed by Dan Doherty, our Director of Counseling. Each of those groups had stakeholders within that, again, faculty, students, and parents. As we began to plan in the strategic planning committees, we realized several things. First, that we needed ways to measure our progress. We were challenged with some of the overlap that was coming up between the pillars. A lot of social emotional issues really landed also in the equity area. Some of the equity issues landed in the instructional areas as well. There were also new mandates, commitments, and challenges that were coming out. A good example of that is MTSS, which is a new initiative that is making us rethink our system of intervention for students. We also had, of course, the biggest direct impact was the COVID-19 pandemic and its impact in the very middle of the strategic plan. And that required us to rethink our goals and how we were achieving them, and raised and created new goals. Certainly, we began as a district to look at student engagement. We had data points on the Youth Development Survey and the Bach-Harrison Survey that raised concerns for us about the school protective factors and student engagement in school. And that led us to really focus on student engagement last year as a district goal. We began to think about, especially after COVID, the ultimate impact on students, and what were students really thinking and feeling and experiencing through their eyes as they walk the halls of our schools in the 3 very different school years, from 21 to 22 now to this year. All of that really boils down to a need for clarity and focus, which we were kind of all struggling with. Multiple goals, new goals and challenges because of COVID and new state initiatives. And so those goals, together with the need for clarity and focus, got us thinking about reworking the strategic plan, keeping all the same goals, all the same actions, but into a new framework that would help us to see it through the lens of students and help us to measure it in a more effective way. Couple of themes. One is we often say at North Shore, we're in the moving business. And one thing that we were trying to apply to the strategic plan in our discussions in committees is this question of how are students growing throughout the system K through 12. So if we have a strategic plan goal that had something to do with, let's say, media literacy, how would that work in the elementary school, to the middle school, and through high school? So that developmental approach, that is how students are living their lives in school. They're developing, they're growing. That other piece is so key, and this is a picture of our new addition in the middle school. Is, you know, I think of a middle schooler today, and I was there today actually with Dr. O'Hara, looking out from that new addition, walking into the cafeterias right behind those red doors. What are they thinking and feeling? You know, what are our students truly experiencing, and what is the impact of the strategic plan on their lived experience? How they feel in school, how they perform, how much they enjoy school and are engaged in school. And that is the very goal that we focused on last year. District Goal 4 for the 21-22 school year was to develop an action plan relying upon past research on the degree to which all of our students felt engaged, including their active engagement inside and outside of school, and also rely upon previous studies to inform our research. And when the board was speaking about this last year, they really got to a point of talking about action. We have to move beyond studying, getting data. We have so much data. We need to start taking concrete action steps, and that's what we did start to do. We had worked with an organization called Challenge Success out of Stanford, who helped us to collect some more survey data, but that was more actionable. That gave us really good strategies that we could implement in our schools. And they gave us this framework of engagement and well-being. And you can see this notion of thriving in the upper northeast quadrant there. We wanted students to be highly engaged and have high well-being, doing well in school, but also having wellness at the same time. So that thriving area is really what we're aiming for, a little directionality there. In March of last year, as part of the work on engagement, we had a tri-state consortium team come to North Shore. And in line with that goal, we wanted them to look at the student experience. And really, it was 2022, 4 years with a strategic plan. How had it impacted students? Where were they? And we not only interviewed students and observed classes, but the tri-state evaluation team met with teachers, met with parents, looked at hundreds and hundreds of artifacts that we had collected from our teachers, and really gave us recommendations on where we were with our strategic plan at the time. As part of that visit, we really needed to define what we meant by engagement. And we came up with from research and theory and challenge success work, a 4-part matrix that helped us define what engagement is. Engagement is meaningful learning in the classroom. Engagement is positive relationships and a sense of belonging. Engagement is participation in interest-based extracurricular opportunities, and wellness and well-being. And really, when you look at that, it is simple, but those are the core pieces of the student experience throughout the school day. And of course, as they leave the school walls, the impact of schooling that it has on them. As a result of the Tri-State visit, and just to step back for a second, we are a member of the Tri-States Consortium. It includes districts from Long Island, the rest of New York State, Connecticut, and New Jersey, the Tri-State area. And it is facilitated by retired superintendents, and it has members who are administrators and teachers in those districts. So districts like Chappaqua, Scarsdale, Hewlett, Hapog, Oyster Bay, Locust Valley now, other districts in Connecticut. Really high-performing districts that tend to share our values and our approach, and they give us feedback. We will go on visits. I know I went on a world language visit last year to Oyster Bay, and they will come to us. And so we had a great team of teachers. And what we worked to do with the feedback from that visit was to develop a framework that would help us to, in this last year of the strategic plan, assess the strategic plan, clarify it, help us to focus, and also help us to move forward and make recommendations as we end this year, which we will be doing in the May end of year meeting, at the board meeting. We'll have a part 2 to this meeting to share data and share conversations that we've had throughout the year and our progress. So the North Shore Journey, we call it, is a promise. And it's a promise to all families and students as to what we want for them along their North Shore journey, whether that's 13 years, whether that's 4 years, and they've lived in another district for another time. But these are the 4 areas and other areas within them that we want for our students: growth in academic proficiency and mastery, growth as expert, joyful, and independent learners, meaningful and authentic learning through real-world connection and application, positive relationships and citizenship, normalizing the appreciation of difference and self-respect, open-minded communication and collaboration, growth in areas of personal interest, growth in self-empowerment, and growth in skills for healthy living. So we say the North Shore Journey equals the strategic plan plus the student engagement framework and plus the lived student experience, all in one framework to combine all those initiatives and goals that we've had into one framework that we can work within. Just a couple of thoughts on the process of the North Shore Journey. So we had the engagement study that we began last fall, 2021, the Tri-State visit in the spring, along with the feedback in the spring of 2022 from the Tri-State visit. We had our strategic planning committees meeting throughout last year, and they were giving us feedback on the strategic plan, some of the things that they wanted in, not only content or new goals, but also process. A lot of discussions about how are we measuring, how are we ensuring that this is happening K through 12? What does this look like if we're talking about a certain goal? What does it look like in 2nd grade versus 9th grade? So a lot of those questions happened as a result of rolling out the strategic plan. Of course, they weren't a part of the original strategic plan. This new framework tries to address those questions. This summer, we had our leadership team meet. We had a great administrative retreat at the Cradle of Aviation Museum, and we had a second retreat later in the summer, and we worked on refining the North Shore Journey with the strategic plan and starting to talk about habits, our systems, our processes in our schools, and how they support this plan and these goals. big concept that we talked about is why, purpose. Really focusing when we're doing this work of the strategic plan to focus on the why and the overarching goals. Ultimately, we want our students to leave the North Shore schools and to be able to do whatever it is that they want to do and be successful and lead a prosperous and balanced life and affect the world in a positive way, to discover their dreams, in short. Not a short order, but everything ultimately that we want to do as a system, starting in kindergarten, should lead up to that. When you operate from the why and you start to look at how and what actions you're taking, it creates a more purposeful basis for measurement of progress over a long period of time. And this can move you away from isolated actions like adopting like a curriculum in one grade level or establishing a parent liaison committee at one grade level and not looking at how it fits into the whole picture. So we're trying to really look at the connections between all the items in the original strategic plan. And finally, the strategic plan is based on the lived experience of all students. And the North Shore Journey framework allows us to think of the progression of actions from kindergarten to second grade to middle school to high school and how students are growing and developing. We say along their North Shore Journey, all students will engage in the assured experiences below those listed before with consistency and increasing complexity so they can discover their dream. Just want to take a couple minutes to go through those areas of the North Shore Journey. And then I'm going to finish up and open this up to discussion from the board. Meaningful learning and academic growth. And when we think about meaningful learning and academic growth in the original strategic plan, we've tried to categorize learning into how learning takes place in the classroom and how students experience it to create a more cohesive approach to establishing these goals, taking actions, and measuring them. So growth in academic proficiency and mastery is the bread and butter of what we do. Certainly, we want our students to grow as expert, joyful, and independent learners, and that involves differentiation in their own reflection abilities, and certainly making learning meaningful and engaging through authentic learning, connections to the real world. Positive relationships is something that we've talked a lot about in all of our schools, and a sense of belonging. The leadership team and the survey work that we did through the Tri-States visit and discussions with our faculty, parents, and students led us to three major areas: positive relationships and citizenship. And that includes trusted relationships with adults, with each other, also things like community service and kind of breaking down that wall between school and society so that students can actually become a part of society as part of their schooling experience. I think community service is a great example of that, and a lot of our students are engaged in that. So, but creating those opportunities for more students. Normalizing the appreciation of difference and self-respect, learning which develops respect and appreciation of diverse experiences, backgrounds, and perspectives, but also we want our students to feel proud of who they are, whatever their background is. We want them to have both, to walk out of school feeling confident, but also to have open-minded communication and collaboration, to know how to have civil discourse, open-minded conversation, and to know how to respectfully disagree, which is an important skill, and also a method of learning, especially as we get into our secondary grade levels. The last two areas, growth in areas of personal interest, experiences, and opportunities which allow for the discovery and a thorough development of passions, interests, strengths, and potential career paths. This could include athletics, the fine and performing arts, certainly, everything from STEM and robotics to other electives, world languages, wherever students feel proclivity, we want students to be able to advance and develop that talent and that interest. And finally, wellness. Two areas we identified here: growth and self-empowerment, opportunities that allow students to have a sense of resilience, courage, emotional regulation, and a growth mindset. And I'd say too that ability to advocate for what they need and communicate what they need for their own wellness. Certainly also growth in skills for healthy living, learning in a school environment which creates an awareness of healthy habits, the ability to identify and manage obstacles and threats to a healthy balance and personal wellness. Everything from stress management to being able to read food labels and make good decisions about diet fit into there. So again, a wide category. one thing that we've talked about as a leadership group is this notion of habits and how goals are great, but the little things that you are doing every day, day in, day out, that students experience day in, day out, the routines, the assured experiences, that is what makes change over time. And we've been using a text actually that Principal Finder suggested to us called Atomic Habits. This is our grounding text for the leadership team and really connects nicely to the finishing of this original strategic plan this year. Really looking at the habits, doing what we call a habit scorecard to look at what we're doing in each school to support the strategic plan through the lens of the North Shore journey. What are we not doing? What can we adopt? And this could be simple things like making sure every principal knows every student's name, to how students are greeted in the morning, to classroom routines. All of those little habits really go a long way when repeated over 180 school days and then times 13. When you think about it, there's a lot of power in those little things. We think of big changes a lot, but it's often those little changes. But those habits, those procedures, those systems. And we ask overall, big questions of this North Shore journey. How consistent and assured are the experiences intentionally implemented through all school buildings? How aligned are the assured experiences in a deliberate progression, K through 12, not just in curriculum, but also in experience? Even with our SVOs, our students learning about collaboration, communication, innovation, and problem solving at a higher level in their high school years than in their elementary years. What does that look like at each grade level? This is very important. How accessible are all of those experiences for all students? Are all students having access to the extracurriculars, the electives, the academic mastery, the positive relationships, and the wellness? Do we see patterns with groups? Often we think about our newcomers to this country, our UNL students, and what is their experience like? And so looking at that data to make conclusions and to implement solutions. Also, how is student progress assessed? And this is very important. How are we assessing how students are doing in these areas and taking actions if students aren't doing well? So I just want to end with, we talked about process, now progress. What are we going to be doing this year to finish the final year of the strategic plan strong? I call it the 3 A's, not very complicated, but we're going to act. Which includes continuing to work on the original strategic plan action items through the lens of the North Shore journey, with recommendations with atomic habits in mind. So, one thing we'll get questions on a lot, especially because we've restructured the district committees, is, we had an equity committee last year, a teaching and learning committee, a social emotional learning committee. What happened to those recommendations? This year we have Viking community committees, which are tasked with specific goals like the summer program or finding grant opportunities or some of our other MTSS goals for student supports, very specific. Well, those recommendations are still in our bank. They're still there and we're still processing them. The administration is doing that work. We're grouping those actions within the North Shore journey and we're developing measurement tools. That leads us to the second column, which is what we call Ask Assess. And that's kind of like, we had the intro to the strategic plan of the stakeholder meetings, the surveys, the discussions with parents and students. We're going to have the outro of that to help us take stock in how we've done and also to help us assess where we need to go next. Survey data and artifact and statistical analysis will also help us. Dr. Smythe and I have worked on all of this together. And I want to thank her for all of her work, as well as our school administration, our curriculum directors and principals. But we are building a study of all of our students, their participation, their engagement in different activities, their academic data, to see if we see patterns in how our students are doing. Dr. Smythe actually put that report together in 2017. It's like a 400-page equity study, and we're re-upping it, we're revisiting it, but it's going to give us a lot of great data. So that's just one example, but it does take a long time. Finally, articulate. Carol and I will report on progress at the May 25th meeting. We'll certainly give you updates along the way, but that's our last, that's the superintendent's end of year report, and I think a fitting time to report on this. also revised actions within the North Shore Journey framework. Our goal is to keep the framework, but to modify and add actions as needed, so that we can continue to promise those 9 areas, those 4 big areas and those 9 areas within, to continue to stay focused on those areas, but make progress on what comes. So to balance the changing world with stable goals and focus. So thank you so much. And we're going to take questions now. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. We will let you wrap up with technology. Trustees will organize their questions, and as soon as you get back up here, we will we'll proceed. Gee, turning off the light before you lifted the screen. Wind it up here. Okay, trustees, in any particular order, whoever would like to ask any questions of Chris or the administration? Chris, Rich?
I'll start. Thank you. Thank you very much for the presentation, all the work that the two of you have been doing with this. It's a tremendous amount. It's mind-boggling. But what to me is even more mind-boggling is the assessment of all this data. In terms of really taking a look at how effective the strategic plan has been in order to move forward from it. I mean, you referred to several things that are going to be done. I was just curious if you're going to be speaking to students who were here for part of the time and have moved on and going to college, and see how that's impacted them.
I think one thing that a lot of educators have been talking a lot about now, Carol and I joke about the word transfer, the T word, because that is the ultimate form of it, is what our students have taken away outside of their experience to post-secondary college career. So yes, we actually did in the APIB study last year develop a rich contact list of students. So that is something I think continuing to develop not only the survey, but to talk about, what that, especially their high school experiences had, but beyond those actions. I think the first step in that, because it is a lengthy process, is taking stock of what we have actually done and then trying to draw correlational patterns between that and then that data, that softer survey data and interview data with the performance data that we'll have. Thank you.
I like how you challenged us, Dave, to organize our questions. I am completely disorganized with my questions, but I'll start throwing them out. So this is such impressive work, and it's hard to fully absorb. I think Rich was trying to say the same thing, that how you're doing this is amazing. I was looking at the materials you sent us earlier in the week, Dr. Z. You sent us a link to faculty survey related to North Shore Journey results. The results of the faculty. Now that was done this summer.
That was done at the end of last school year.
At the end of last school year. I opened it up and I thought, I have to print this out. This is, and I pressed the print button, and the print app told me it was going to be 46 double-sided pages. So I thought, okay, I'm not going to print this on my own printer, but I started kind of, flipping through it, and there were, I think, maybe 9 questions on the grid, and an enormous number of people answered all of them. So I'm punching through them, trying to get some highlights for myself and thinking, how on earth do you synthesize this information? And then I looked through, your presentation and some of the other, the preliminary materials, and you're doing it. It's mind-boggling. I see it happening.
I just wanted to say, not to interrupt you, but that's exactly like the thought process, like that, and to what Mr. Galati was saying too. It like so many goals, which we need, such a changing dynamic world. That is what we're trying to get a handle on. And that there, I don't know what researchers say, but it was kind of like my loose attempt at member checking. So we had this idea for the 4 different quadrants, and it was a check with the teachers, like, are you seeing what we're seeing? Are you seeing these patterns? So before we continue to move forward.
I'm impossibly impressed with it, Carol. It's why you're so good at what you do. I was struck by, and I guess I don't know if a question is going to come out of this, but I wanted to talk through a couple of things that, based on my look at those survey results and my absorption of what you've given us tonight, really jumped out. There were 2 things in particular, based on some of the comments I saw from faculty. I saw a number of faculty talk about the students needing to, or, hoping that the students will be able to develop more resilience, and sort of lamenting how that was, negatively affected by the years of COVID and how it affected their wellness. And when I first looked at your wellness items, growth and self-empowerment and skills for healthy living, I didn't have I think you gave us this in an extracted form, right? Where you gave us just the bullet points without the explanation. And I'm thinking, okay, resilience fits into self-empowerment. And I see it there now. But there was also the part about stress. There were a number of comments about stress, and it's one of the things that, again, an anecdote that I'm starting to see at home. And this is only from a 7th grader. So I'm really interested to see how the development of the new transcript and the way we look at grades plays into how we evaluate the levels of stress that our students are feeling at various points in their academic careers. And then the other thing that I was only just struck by tonight, actually, when you described normalizing the appreciation of difference and self-respect, and I just want to read it out loud to reinforce my own comment here. Learning which develops respect and appreciation of the diverse experiences, backgrounds, and perspectives of the world, while also instilling pride in one's own story and background. I heard you read that, and I thought to myself, it's just a comment. I may be interpreting it a little bit differently, but it seems to me that the relationship should be reversed, that it is only once a certain level of maturity is reached where the student has pride in their own story and background that they can then truly open up and respect and appreciate other experiences. I'm sorry, I'm not being articulate about this, but I found just in my own, I think just in my own lived experience, it seems to me that, I spent the first half of my life incredibly insecure about a ridiculous number of things. And as I've gotten older and probably more cantankerous, I found that these things do very much go together, but I think I've developed a greater understanding of the world as I've learned to accept myself and my own flaws. So I'm just trying to apply that here, but I think it's something that our shared valued outcomes talks about, addresses as well. So that was the other thing that was in my mind as I was looking at all of this, was how we're in sync. We seem to be in really good sync with these 2 efforts, these 2, synchronous efforts.
I just want to say, sorry to interrupt you, but that is such a good example of the developmental view. Like, when we look at any of these goals that were in the original strategic plan, you have to look at it through the development of the child K through 12 or even beyond, because of the nuance of that development and how it's so fragile and so important how you work within a certain grade. To your point.
But I guess that's the final thing is this, the way I would put this out as a not so much a question, just that one of the challenges I see in this building the progression of all of these goals through K through 12, it just seems enormous. And yet I see that we've made tremendous steps towards this. I see that, the way, and again, I can only, through my personal experience of my child, thinking about the things that affected her in elementary school, how her teachers and the support network treated those occasions in elementary school and now in middle school. And I am seeing that she is growing in these really interesting ways that I'm happy to be observing. And it does feel like this new journey framework is really bringing these things all together in a very great way to do, as you said, to evaluate our strategic plan and move us forward into the next one. Thank you.
Appreciate that, Maria. I don't think I would find you cantankerous.
You don't talk to her enough.
I guess, sorry. Other trustees. If you're ready to go, we can go around. Sure.
So I was sitting here, your presentation was incredible. All the backup material was really rich. And I'm sitting here and I'm reflecting about what we have here as a district, right? The incredible academic offerings, the breadth of extracurricular opportunities, our incredible infrastructure that just keeps getting better and better, our district's mission and philosophy. And you realize this does not happen overnight. It does not happen in a year. It does not happen with one board or one superintendent or one cohort of students, right? It's incremental and cumulative over many, many generations of stakeholders. And the strategic plan is really where it all begins. And it is a promise, like you said, which was beautiful. That one word, promise, beautiful. It's a promise that as an organization, we are going to grow and evolve, right? And so I loved reading everything that you had. So often, I think when we talk about goals, our academics are so strong here that sometimes I think we focus on things that maybe we feel that we need improvement. So I was glad to see that we had, right out of the gate, meaningful learning and academic growth. And in that, you talk about the opportunities we provide. And obviously, opportunities are critical, right? I would love to see us add that we're not just interested in providing opportunities moving forward, but also removing barriers. Because as we all know, there are many barriers to learning that our students face. Undiagnosed learning disabilities. I'm not just talking about at the early grades. I'm talking about going as far as our high schoolers who are struggling in different subject areas, not knowing that they have a real learning issue that's gone unidentified, looking at barriers to mental health and substance use that get in the way, physical disabilities that make access to curriculum a struggle, medical issues, socioeconomic issues, poverty, homelessness, malnutrition. We don't talk about that enough here, and that does affect our students. Language barriers, a lack of access to learning materials or technology at home, and of course, students who come to school every day and do not feel safe in our buildings to learn. So I think this idea of removing barriers to learning is as important as providing opportunities. And I think we do that, right? We are incorporating assisted technology. We have, over the pandemic, so many great things in terms of food service and technology for our students. But I do think it would be good to codify this, particularly as it is a major tenet to universal design for learning. That's sort of my main comment. I do have one much smaller comment, which was I was part of the strategic plan team last year, a couple of years ago, and we had extensive student surveys there. And it was probably the best part of those 3 days, going through those student surveys. It would be interesting to use the same student surveys that we used back then, which surveyed students starting in 3rd grade all the way up to 12th, to see whether there's any sort of overall movement, to use your term, in what students are saying, what their experiences has been, to see whether, it's another data point to capture that student voice. So thank you very much.
I'm gonna move on to me, so if you have a response, go.
No, super quick. I was just gonna say I think that the pre-post idea is a great idea. We have those surveys, and one thing in terms of the barriers, that is, I think, like an overarching question that overlays this whole thing, and I think that's something we kind of listed them. We have to refine those overarching questions that aren't about any one area, but like barriers that's everything. That's extracurriculars, that's electives, that's positive relationships, that's certainly academic.
Going through I was on those early committees also, and going through those student surveys was eye opening. There was a lot about lunch, but there was a lot of good data in there. So to be able to revisit that and see where we've moved is a great point. I'll be brief. I love the connection to student experience and engagement that you highlighted. That is what it's all about. That's what drives all these actions. One of the charts you talked about, engagement and well-being. I don't know what the chicken and the egg is there, but those are certainly interrelated toward the outcomes we're seeking. I didn't see the word in here, but I was very glad you mentioned it in your presentation. The equity study that Carol had worked on has to be a filter through which all of this is viewed, and to Rich's point about assessment, and to see how we're doing on all of these vectors is critical. I'm not a big fan of putting labels on individual students, putting them, in boxes. There's no student athlete. There's no student musician. All students do all these different things. But there are certainly students who are in some ways missing the train and not getting on the journey to the degree to which we want them to be there. And so understanding whether those barriers are on an individual basis or if they're caused by some larger systemic reason is part of this evaluative process. So I obviously know Dr. Smythe is the person to be looking at that, because someone had to write that 400-page report and do all the work to get behind it. I know that's been a priority, but I definitely wanted to highlight that as well. Have to reach all of our kids. The growth in areas of personal interest, I think it deserves its own box. I'm glad it's there all by itself. I'm colorblind, so I don't know what color that box is, but I think it's orange maybe. But I liked it, and I think it fits well with the overall mantra of students discovering their dreams, but also understanding what they're about. To the point Maria made, which I thought was actually very articulate, which is that it's very hard to ask people to accept and understand and learn from others if they don't accept and understand who they are. And so the degree to which we can establish that first for all of our kids, recognizing the difference of our kids, their personalities, their strengths, their areas where they need work, their personalities, the backgrounds from which they come, their experiences, culturally, economically, etc., will be the contributing factor to all of us as a community being able to have those conversations and have that respect for each other that we need to be able to learn. So glad you put that there by itself. I just want to understand two questions. How and why, I guess, are the filters you're planning to put through all of this when you talk about your subgroups, talk about the different areas that are going to be putting this together? Those are the filters?
When we look at those original items listed in the 2018 strategic plan and how, where they fit in those different quadrants, and as part of the accounting of what's been done, why it's been done that way, why would we do it differently, and certainly what are the habits, how is it being implemented?
Great. And then just lastly, this strategic plan was set to expire in 2023. Do we feel like we're going to push it a couple years because we have the gap of COVID, or how do you see the timing work?
Question. I think what we'd like to propose is this framework, some version of it based on what we find this year, and different actions that supplement the original strategic plan action. So I guess an extension or like a reboot of the original strategic plan with this new framework. But that will be part of the recommendation that we, Carol and I make to the board in May.
We have new characters, but same backdrop. Great. Those are my questions, Lisa.
So I have some comments and also will end in a few questions or clarity as I was reading. And I'll echo my fellow trustees that this is tremendous work, and the volume and the thought that went into this is really staggering. And it's such an important roadmap in that if you don't know where you're going, you kind of can't get there. So, and it does highlight such important areas. For me, also, you can't see it, but the orange box did stick out of the growth of areas of personal interest. And I know it's sort of baked into the pie, but I think worth highlighting that there are different, that changes along the journey. And I think you've heard me say from this seat before, and I'll repeat again that, the what makes us us, and not pigeonholing students and those different on-ramps and all having the opportunity to change within that journey, and grow about yourself, but also not having a singular journey. That postgraduate experience can be increasingly more unique, and that four-year college isn't always the best end game for every student. And so I think really making sure that we are aware and increasing opportunities that are more diverse and less in a particular formula that we've been in will help students who maybe have not fit those molds continue to thrive in unique ways. And so I don't know that it's certainly in this matrix, but I just felt called to kind of highlight that a little bit. I don't know why I just said that way. Okay. So for me, also, it comes to the metric piece, and Andrea touched on this a little bit, but for me, the consistency there is really important. And I actually would almost request that before May, if it's at all possible, to get a better understanding of how the measurement is developing. I personally wouldn't want to wait to the end of the year for that portion. For me, the measurement is really the meat of this. And I think it's really important, particularly how are we measuring that kids are thriving? So it's important that we recognize it's on a matrix and there are ways to get to that matrix, but there are so many ways that kids mask different issues, and my fellow trustees already mentioned a lot of them, but I am so curious, and I'm glad that it's your job and not mine to develop these tools, but I'm interested in how we're going to measure so many of these things that you've laid out. So I would ask for that. And the other question I have would be related to COVID, and that, I know that it's sort of, we're moving forward and the world is open, but I think that it's sort of missing that we had this 2 to 3 year kind of trauma, for lack of a better experience. And we hope that kids are on the path, but I think that the ways that that whole change in learning, and for teachers and for students, and I don't want to not acknowledge the impact that has had on our schools. And I don't know in our strategic plan where that can be captured. I don't know. And so I just want to leave room for us to have that in our analysis and our eye for, what is the fallout certainly we threw a ton of resources, and we were one of the best districts in some ways to handle it in terms of learning opportunities and having school open. And, I'm very proud of being in a district that recovered in a way, and how we got through it, and our outdoor learning and all those wonderful things that we did. But I have to believe that there's sort of a remnant somewhere in the kids who are going to now try and oh, but this is how we always did it. And so catch up, you know, I don't know. I don't know what I'm asking, but I'm curious that for me, if we're thinking long-term, I want to understand what the impacts are.
So I think just to, in terms of both questions, and I think they really complement each other. I think, me with Carol, like we really need to look at research methodology and what other districts have done, large scale, small scale. And I think the COVID impact really points to like the longitudinal piece and that and we were talking about this today with a cohort with certain grade level, with star scores and how when you trace that grade level back, they were in a certain key grade level when schools shut down. So I think about, our current third graders is another example. Learning how to read in kindergarten, that's spring. That's exactly when schools close. So I think there's a longitudinal research approach that we look at cohorts and how they've performed over time. But that will definitely inform,
I would love to see that as part of our strategic plan to make sure that we're analyzing for that actively, and that if there are interventions to be designed, that we are not waiting till they're in high school, or that we're taking opportunities. The earlier the intervention, the better. And I guess that we probably are, but to codify that to me would be helpful for the community and for the students to understand, like, that we are actively participating in this recovery process. We're not just, that we're aware that there could be one.
Just one thing quick, I think the codifying, we are in the process of developing an MTSS plan, which is a newer version of an AIS plan. It was AIS in 2000, it was RTI in 2010, now it's MTSS. So it really is codifying the plan for interventions, but what in each of those iterations, it's expanding what's being monitored and intervened on. So we think with MTSS, we can look at things like engagement. We can look at a more holistic approach in line with this.
So I'm new at all this MTSS.
Multi-tiered system of supports. So we'll, and certainly before May, give much more backup. Yep.
Microphone stopped working. Oh, there it is. Okay.
I would also just, the other note that I have to Andrea's point about using the old questionnaires, whatever metrics that we're developing now, especially if we're going to just kind of move forward in this new pattern, I would say, I would love for that metric to be sort of a standard that then we set. If it's a successful metric, if we decide that it's a useful tool, but some consistency to lean on, I think would be helpful to carry through, like to build a metric that we can rely on. I think those are, I'm going to pass the microphone for now, but my notes are.
Yes, thank you very much. You guys are certainly the dynamic duo. This is really, it was a lot to go through, and it was very thorough, and I do appreciate everything that you did in this presentation and in the backup materials. I do want to talk about something that I think is interwoven in this, which I think is really important in the post-pandemic world, which are the concepts of responsibility, accountability, and advocacy, developing those in our students. And it's in there. But I really feel, based on some of the conversations that I've had, some of the reading I've done, and the Times ran a story about this, about with the suspension of testing, with the suspension of in-person learning, some of the responsibility, accountability, I know we want to look at other methods of evaluating students, but I don't think we can lose sight of traditional testing that they have to take to be successful in terms of college applications and later on in life. So, one of the things I think that the most important thing, I think, as a parent of children who are now beyond college, they're postgraduate work, right? Is that if that they had to own it, right? That if they thought that they were treated unfairly or the grade wasn't correct? That I did not call up the teacher, that they had to learn how to advocate for themselves, make an appointment with the teacher, and explain why they thought their grade was unfair. Um, and I think when you get away from, traditional evaluation, some of that gets lost. I think we've been a little more lax with the standards, and it's going to come back. And when these kids are going to tell you when they hit college and graduate school, my son came home from law school. He goes, "Mom, did you know there's only one test in law school? There's no extra credit. There are no project." Like, yeah, dude, I went there. I know all about it. I told you before you applied. But you want to make sure that they have all the skill sets. So I think as we're bringing, as the regions become mandatory again, we need to make sure that these kids are being prepared properly for that they're taking ownership of their work, that they're advocating for themselves, and that they are becoming self-sufficient in those areas, because I think those are the skill sets that are going to carry them as they complete their journey. The other thing I wanted to talk about was what Trustee Cashman touched on. I think one of the areas that we have underutilized and under advocated for our students is the BOCES program. So talent comes in many forms, right? You can be a musician, you can be a mathematician, you can be a skilled craftsperson, you could be a plumber. There are many different ways that talents lie, right? I mean, don't ask me to paint a house or to carve or, build something. I couldn't possibly do it. And I know from personal experience that there are many students that would have benefited from the BOCES program, or at least tried the BOCES program, that they didn't think about it until they felt it was too late to be in there. And I think it's really important that we put that out there as a viable option for students. Not everyone is meant to sit in a classroom. And not everyone is meant to be a lawyer or a doctor. There are different skill sets, and quite frankly, it's a very expensive program to participate in. I don't think people understand that, and it's really a privilege to be in a district that has that available option for students. And when we are talking about engagement, some of the different things that we've done, like the dance program as being, a substitute for PE for kids who hate PE but love to dance. Those opportunities, I hope that we're continuing to look at different ways that we can reach out and engage students. The dual enrollment program, I think, is another, good example. And I'm hoping when we're looking at this, we're continuing to look at different options for students that would continue to have them engage, different opportunities that maybe are a little outside of the box. That's all I have for now.
Very good. Lisa?
Well, I think you've all covered it. So I agree with all my fellow trustees. I think you've all raised some great points. And I also want to just echo the thank you to all the hard work that went into this. I mean, I think when you look at these documents, you see where the funding goes, why we need that funding, because this is what makes North Shore so special. This is what makes North Shore North Shore. We have all these great opportunities. We are, really trying to ensure that our students are successful after high school and after college, if they choose to go to college or if they choose to do something else. And I think that, we recognize that we need to focus on, absolutely, we have to focus on academics, but we need to focus on the skills that will make them successful. I love that the SVOs are weaved in here. They have to be collaborators and communicators and problem solvers if they want to succeed in life. I agree about the surveys, and I have a couple of questions in that I'll just throw in with my comments. So the Bach Harrison and the Challenge Success surveys, I'm glad you brought those up because I was going to ask about them. Would you ask those those same questions in a survey, or would they be different questions? Because those are really, those were so important.
And very standardized
Yeah.
and used on a wide scale. We did give the youth development survey this past spring where, it is free. So we're, Mr. Doherty and Mr. Couture are still waiting for the results. So we'll get those to you as soon as we have them. But we have a comp to comp there from the YDS from years ago. So that, to your point, yes.
Are these copyrighted? So we couldn't go and ask them again the Challenge Success and the Bach Harrison questions, or could we?
They do analysis
change them?
work for you too. Like, so that part of it is, the youth development survey is free, but they also will do the analysis. That takes the time as well. Challenge Success said something to us about repeating the survey, like advising against that. But we were in contact with them, and we will reach out to them about that.
I think it would be interesting to see the progression. I mean, we've had this goal of engagement for the year, and I'm curious to see where we are. And so related to that is also the goal of wellness, and it says learning and a school environment which creates an awareness of healthy habits. And I just want to make sure, obviously I want to make sure we're teaching those healthy habits, but I also want to make sure we're not contributing to the stress of our students. And I think some of my fellow trustees have touched upon that, but I just want to make sure that in here somewhere we are talking about what we are doing to contribute to that. So, just to make sure that that we're aware of it and that we are not contributing to it. And related to COVID, I thought Trustee Cashman brought up a great point. There was a whole education section in the Times this weekend and an article about all the different mental health programs. So I didn't see Ruler specifically mentioned in here unless I missed it, but I'm curious if I know that it's been in Glenwood Landing for a while. We just rolled it out in the other elementary schools, and I'm just wondering how we evaluate that. Is that the best program for us? There seem to be so many now that have come out of COVID because of all the anxiety and the depression and the stress that seems to be arising after COVID. So just want to make sure we're also looking at that, evaluating it, and determining if that's the best program for us, and is it successful, or is it working? And I think the only other comment I wanted to make is I love the habits book that the administrators were reading. And I remember, I think it was at least 4 or 5 years ago, I think it was you, Dr. Z, that recommended The Gift of Failure. And as a parent, I read it and I loved it. I still refer back to it today. And I'm just wondering if we could do a parent book, like a book for parents that we all read, and that's something that ties into the North Shore journey that'll help us.
That was another principal finder recommendation, The Gift of Failure. But I remember we did Lost Child in the Woods about outdoor learning at Seacliff. Yeah, I think, and that one was, I think, interesting because it talked about productive struggle and how that actually builds resilience, teaches kids how to transfer. We felt like that actually helped them do better in assessments and be more creative at the same time, but we'll do it.
Just say one thing, because a lot of trustees, including myself, have spoken about this idea of data collection, and I want to make sure that we give the administrators clarity. There are two kinds of data collection. I was talking about collecting student data in terms of shaping the strategic goal, right? Strategic plan, excuse me. And then some of the other trustees are talking about how do we actually measure the success of the strategic plan, which of course is a totally separate animal, right? So I just want to make sure that you have the information you need in terms of distinguishing between those two things. One other thing. And in terms of since everyone brought up data analysis, a lot of times our data analysis really is descriptive, and we might want to start looking at more inferential data analysis where we're actually running more sophisticated statistical programs to see whether there really is significant differences between groups and interventions. Like usually we're just getting the mean scores, or we're getting frequencies or whatever it is, but to sort of be able to have a higher level of statistical analysis done, which I know you guys know how to do because you're really good at this, would sort of amp up, right, our ability to measure the movement.
Looking around, looks like we can wrap this conversation up. I really want to thank, again, I'll just do it one more time on behalf of all the trustees, the administration, Chris and Carol, putting all this together, for working on this, for dedicating yourself to this for the benefit of these 2,600 students. I want to take just a moment to thank the trustees, both for your good questions here, but also for the work that you did in preparing for this. This is a lot of work, to get ready to read this back up. I mean, I find it interesting work, so it's not like it's a chore. But there are many pages, and so thank you all for doing that. And I look forward to May and any updates you have along the way. We will now move on to public comment, and we'll invite any members of the community who are here to please come to the podium, state your name, town of residence, and address the board with any thoughts or concerns or questions.
Ready? Automatic.
Automatic. You just gotta, that first word gets lost and then you're in.
Hey, how are you? So, my name is Tom Kaufman. I know many of you. I just want to take a minute.
I'm sorry, Tom, just town of
Yeah.
residence.
Oh, I live in Glenhead. Yes. I want to take a couple minutes to talk about the tutoring policy that you have, that I agree with the spirit of it. You know, I'm a teacher. I teach at Roslyn, and when I read it, the preamble, the spirit makes sense to me. The idea that, you know, we should have a rich curriculum. If we have this rich curriculum and talented teachers, we should be able to kind of keep everything in-house. But you also kind of prepare for the contingency, or what if parents want to go get tutors? So then you go to the secondary staff, and it's sort of very logical that a teacher shouldn't be able to tutor his or her own students. I've tutored for 20 years in North Shore and in Roslyn, and that makes sense. But then we get to the coaching part of that, which to me is oddly punitive, because it says that coaches can't, hold on, I think my glasses now. Coaches can't provide private professional services to any athlete within the sport they coach. So that means that, like in the summer, if they want to coach on a club team, that they can't. And when we talk about development of our teachers, of our coaches, of our kids, it's super important for those coaches to be with other coaches. And lacrosse in particular, which is my thing, I know that's the only thing I talk about when I come up here, although I do have other interests. Lacrosse on Long Island is really the best lacrosse in the country for high school and for youth. So we have hundreds of talented coaches right around here, and they all work, all of them, except for like our school district, work with these clubs. So I can tell you Keith Cromwell, who is at Locust Valley, who's now at Manhasset, he coaches many teams. John Nestler at MacArthur coaches many teams. Isaac Neal at Port Washington, I could name all of that.
We try not to, even though those people that I'm familiar with that work here, we try to avoid the names, but
Fair enough. I retract that.
That's fine.
I'm trying to use your board terminology. I don't know. My point is, though, that all of these coaches are on the sidelines working together throughout the summer, throughout the year, and it's not a pay-for-play thing. It's a team. Like, of course, if a high school coach says, hey, look, come out to the field here, give me $100 and I'm going to work with you, that's not ethical. Like, that I get. But these teams and these programs where the coaches are working is professional development, is networking, is an opportunity for coaches to develop relationships with kids. So when I look at the coaches in these other school districts that are coaching my kids, coaches from all these other towns, they're developing relationships with my kid and then all the kids from their communities. So when those coaches get those kids up in high school, they have like a built-in network of just relationships. Some come and go. Some kids go to private schools. Some kids go here, there. But they're seeing kids and they're working with kids and they're developing relationships with parents and kids and families in a way that you can't just establish if you're not in that world. So now when we're looking to hire new coaches in lacrosse in particular, our pool of applicants is pretty limited. Like, I can't give you a number, but I would say 85% of the applicants are disqualified. And I think that sort of goes away from the spirit of the rule, which is simply to say, hey, look, we shouldn't have teachers or coaches engaging in this sort of a quid pro quo system. And I would trust that any district administrator, an English chairperson, they saw that happen, they'd jump on that. And I would trust that Don Lang, if he saw that happening, would jump on that. It's logical. It's common sense. So when we have this policy, not that we have to follow everybody, but I hear Dr. Zugliano talking about school visits. You sort of see, hey, what are our neighbors doing? What are our colleagues doing? There really aren't any schools that have that in a punitive way. Because now I look at it from the coach's perspective, and I've coached on the varsity level as well. It's not a money-making endeavor. You know, in season, I know, John Pace up at the high school, that guy literally puts in 30 hours.
I'm sorry.
a week.
So, yeah.
Sorry. Any coach in any other district puts in like 30 hours a week. I know the coaches because my son was there. I have two boys. Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday morning, the coaches were volunteering their time up here at the school. That's out of season. That's 3 days a week. And there's no payment for that. So when you start looking at, we might even be breaking labor laws when we look at like per hour, how much these coaches are being paid. And then with this policy, you don't allow them to even, make money in the summer for their family in a way that wouldn't just be making money, but that's developing professionally. So I wanted to give you that anecdote. So hopefully as you talk about it, because not a booster club meeting goes by where Don Lang, where somebody says, hey, this is something we have to address, where a member of the community says, hey, we should address it. But we have to get to the decision makers, and that's you. So I wanted to kind of open up that conversation to you and say it's hurting us. It's hurting our coaches. It's hurting our kids. And I don't think it's sort of in line with the spirit of what you have. And I agree with the spirit of it. So anyway, thank you for your time.
You, Tom. As you know, I and other trustees have been to these booster club meetings and have heard that, and you are correct. It has become an issue. I don't know, Chris, do you want to maybe just give like the very quick procedural update and kind of where it's taken from there?
Yes, hi there. From this point, we discussed this at Boosters and the first athletic policy committee meetings that we're going to bring that to the policy committee, look at the policy, ask those questions. I think the next step would be we have an athletic policy meeting coming up on the 24th, and we'll bring questions from our policy committee back to athletic policy and kind of get that dialogue going. We did have a policy committee meeting this week, and so we have some feedback and some questions from that committee. So we will definitely be talking about it on the 24th.
So much.
Folks?
I'm Gina Martone Brown from the Glen Cove part of the district. I've been a part of the Arts Angels, the district's booster club for the fine and performing arts, for many years, and I'm here tonight to talk about dance. As you may know, in 2019, North Shore added dance to the high school arts curriculum. It's not a club or an extracurricular activity, it's a class. We are one of maybe 7 or 8 other districts on Long Island to offer dance, so we are kind of groundbreaking. The program started in the high school with about 10 students, and it has grown to 70 students today, with classes also reaching down into the 8th grade. It's been tremendous growth in the last 3 years, and especially exciting since one of those years we were in lockdown. The program is exploding, and these kids need a space. In the middle school, the children are dancing in the cafeteria on a floor that is not meant for dance. There are no mirrors. Equipment needs to be taken in and out. In the high school, the kids are dancing in the auxiliary gym, but you can't perform all dances on that beautiful floor because it'll scratch and ding, which is not fair to the athletes and to the kids in the gym classes. So then the kids in the high school go to the stage, and that's a good temporary spot until it's play season or concert season. And then they're in the hallway at times dancing, which is certainly not ideal at all. I know space is at a premium, and I know this issue has been discussed and it has been explored, and it is greatly appreciated. But the program is growing, and our kids need tools to make their dance class the most positive and enriching and safe experience possible. They need a studio. They need a place to call their home. They need a place to hang their shoes. They need a place to build camaraderie. They need a place to express themselves, and they need a safe place to make mistakes and to learn and to grow. So for these reasons, I am asking you to please keep the dance program and their specific needs in your plans for the immediate future and for your plans as the district going forward. Thank you very much. We appreciate all you do. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Gina. I was aware, I guess, just by seeing it, that you were coming here to speak tonight, so my mind has been kind of cycling through the spaces. And I'm hoping the administration has a better idea of what that could be than I can.
I think, one thing that Dalia Rodriguez, Dr. Smythe, Mr. Contreras, Don Lang, and I need to do is really look at space and try and find, as we look at class size and look for opportunities, to try and find that space. Dalia has certainly been an advocate for that need as well as Ms. Kuranishi. And so we will continue to do that. Also, we've talked about a construction steering at these meetings about purchasing flooring and equipment. The space is the constraint that's so difficult because it's just finding it and building it into the schedule. It's almost more of a scheduling thing than a cost thing. So we need to keep that in mind. As has been raised, I know the Arts Angels now, you are raising that. So we will definitely pay attention to that and work that into our planning and see how we can, possibly do that.
So I don't know if you had that plan before you came, but it really does dovetail with so much we talked about in the presentation about students and their interest and about finding themselves and developing themselves and finding that area that can be their connection point to all of this. So thank you.
Hi there. My name is Eve Dorfman. I live in Glen Head. I have a junior in the high school, but I have a freshman in college who just graduated from the high school and been in the district for 13 years. So we benefited from his education here tremendously. So I am going to piggyback on what Gina said. Given the presentation that you gave earlier about the strategic plan and the values of the district, I think it's really important to emphasize what dance has done for my daughter in the district. Dance got her through COVID. Dance has gotten her friends through COVID. It gave them a connection. It kept them sane. My kid got sick during COVID. I didn't know she was sick, but her dance teacher knew. And now she's healthy. So I don't want to underestimate how important this is, not only from a physical activity perspective, but from a psychological perspective. The kids are not on their screens. They're in a room together, interacting, learning how to bond, create relationships, and become aware of their bodies. In this time of crazy social media, this is of the utmost importance. So when you have picture dates and you need to move the kids, please think twice before moving the dance kids. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Mike Conklin from Greenvale, the president of the North Shore Booster Club. And first, I want to say that it was a great week for sports. It's not often we get the cover of Newsday's, excuse me, of Newsday's high school sports section. I think I'm not gonna be able to talk because my thank you. Oh, no, of course. Sorry about that. It's not often we have the cover of the high school sports section. It was nice to see. The what Tom spoke on earlier, the Athletic Booster Club strongly supports a change to the tutoring policy in regard to coaching. The current policy is too restrictive and makes it impossible to hire the most qualified coaches. Support the hiring of those most qualified for the position, including those with affiliation to outside organizations or club teams. Hiring those from club teams was also a recommendation in the most recent report we had from an outside organization on improving our athletics here, though it's some years old now. Policies which make it harder to hire the best should be modified. Our student athletes deserve the opportunity to achieve at the highest level, and the current policy restricts access to having the best coaches. Thank you. And as always, go Vikings. Thanks, Mike.
Hi, everybody. Lisa Vizza, Glen Head. I'm going to speak about athletics as well. It was a really great homecoming weekend. I saw so many of you there. It's truly a homecoming because I did see a lot of alumni there. Some who came before me, like an amazing woman who graduated, what was Seacliff High School in 1943? I mean, what an inspiration and all the wonderful things she's accomplished since then. I mean, it's just indicative of the type of people create in the school district. So I started to reflect on the importance of athletics in our schools. And I reflected as I attended a really well-produced Hall of Fame induction with Don Lang and Margie Anderson. Sorry, I mentioned employees, but I think they need to be congratulated by name. And everyone else in the department that helped put it together. And I was there and observing the people that were being honored. Each one of these individuals, former students who happen to be athletes, very, very good athletes, have gone on to do amazing, amazing things. I would say, I don't know who else was there. A lot of folks are working in healthcare now on the front lines, whether they were nursing staff, physicians, researchers, or even gentleman who's a firefighter. And like, I'm getting choked up about it because I'm thinking, you know, all the aspects of athletics, the teamwork, dedication, training, going for a particular goal in life, they've taken this outside of North Shore to the colleges and now their personal adult lives. So I think it's a wonderful thing. The Hall of Fame is great. I'm glad we're back at it after a few years of applause. And I hope we can do it again. And I'm going to do a little shout out while we're giving props to athletics. The North Shore cross country team, a section of which was honored at the Hall of Fame, a group of 5 women who are still, they're going to be forever teammates. They just completed an enormous thing. For over 15 years. They're 195-0 in division or conference competition in cross country at Bethpage State Park. I think that's huge. And I'm not going to say the individual, but the coach who has dedicated almost 16 years of his expertise in training young women to pursue, they don't even have to be the best runner on the team, but just to go after their dream of running and participating in a team that's just has a history behind it, which is enormous. So I just kind of wanted to add on to your remarks, Chris, and go Vikings, go.
Thank you, Lisa. It is amazing that homecoming is such a great reminder of the passions of all of our students, the outcomes afterwards. I never like to make this about my kids, and they hate it even more, but I do have one child that is participating in that track program in 2 seasons now. I have another child who's playing in the pep band and is certainly enjoying that as well. In addition to all the other things that they do, you realize these kids are doing it all here, and they're finding their passions in these ways and carrying it with them. So it's amazing. Please.
Good evening, everybody. Vanessa Marks, Seacliff by way of Glen Head. In listening to the planning and everything that Dr. Z presented tonight, obviously there's nothing bad that anybody could say about what was presented and what was said. However, from the speakers tonight and what I'm observing from that plan specifically is that, and what Trustee Cashman said, what Trustee Russo said, and what Trustee Colciopa said, is it feels a little bit like we're trying to fit every student into what we want for them versus what they need. And I think that when we do that, we're missing a large portion of our student body that may not be the square peg that fits into the round hole. And I think we really need to address as a district what we are doing, as Trustee Cashman said, to make sure that opportunities are being presented to our students regularly so they are aware of what they can do to grow as human beings, not just to get them to graduate North Shore High School, and not just to get them to feel like they've satisfied what we want for them. And I think some of the athletic comments and what people are saying about what they feel we're lacking in some of those places is huge. The other piece of it too is this restructuring of the committees. You know, I joined a teaching and learning committee, and there were great conversations and ideas and things that came from that now feel like with this new restructuring that are kind of getting put to the wayside. The diversity, equity, inclusion, the only program it seems, the only group that seems that's being kept alive is the athletics advocacy committee. But the rest of what we worked on last year and the great conversations and the great ideas that came from some of those Zoom meetings that we had feel like maybe they're not going to be addressed and maybe those things aren't going to happen. And so, you know, as a parent in the community, as an alumni of this community, as a person who feels very strongly about North Shore and what we are and who we should be, I feel like we're falling short of that regularly. And I feel like people feel that way because of some of the opportunities that are being missed to really push for every single student in this community for, as Trustee McCary said, a safe environment, an inclusive environment, a place where they are all thriving, no matter what their strengths are. You know, my daughter compares herself to people all the time. And my biggest thing, and we've all heard it, is if you judge a fish by how well it climbs a tree, they're always going to be a failure. And so if we're constantly trying to push kids into what we think should be the success for them, we're going to fail regularly. And I just want to make sure with this plan that's going forward and the committees that are meeting regularly, that we're addressing those things to make sure that all of our kids are successful in whatever that means for them.
Thank you. He doesn't have to.
Okay.
Thank you, Ms. Marks. I just wanted to say a couple of things about the committee structure because it is by design. We'll have meetings focused on the different aspects of this new approach to the strategic plan. So I think it will feel very similar to the conversations we had. We did really end strong with the Teaching and Learning Committee, which I know we were on together. Great conversations and ideas. So that will continue, just like in a bit of a different form. And I thank you for the feedback. I think, you know, how we present this stuff sometimes, you know, those ideas and, you know, that's really important. You know, certainly the personalization, differentiation, helping each child find their way. That is like, I'd say, you know, like we say, what makes us us? That's how we started the year. Like that is like such a North Shore thing. You know, I'll just give one example of that. You know, Mr. Contreras, Ms. Doherty, and I were on the phone for an hour and a half about how to fit a child's, make a child schedule work who's a senior so they could be in a certain program. So that we definitely subscribe to that. And that is like at the heart of everything we do. That's what I think makes North Shore special. So we don't want to lose sight of that, but you know, I'll look back at the plan and look at where that, you know, make sure that's clearer and, you know, comes across.
One more point, Trustee Colasiopo said something about making sure that we're not stressing out our kids more by some of the things that we're implementing. And I would like to see a survey done of our students with this constant pushing down their throats of the anti-bullying, the anti-whatever it is that we're telling them not to be or to look out for. Are we creating more situations? We're creating places where students are more stressed out or feeling like they're not living up to a certain standard by making it too much of an issue all of the time. And so I just want to make sure we look at that too, and we're looking at these committees and meeting to go over that. Thank you, guys. Thank you for this evening.
Thanks very much. I'm glad you came. My only regret is that we haven't had someone from Glenwood Landing. We had Greenvale, Glen Cove. I'm from Glenwood Landing, but no? Anyone? Doesn't have to be Glenwood Landing. I have a P.O. box. I'm Glenwood Landing. All right. So with that, we will close public comment. I really appreciate everything everyone had to say. This was a great meeting. I'm really glad to have you here to see this this North Shore Journey Plan in action, and because it takes all of us, the alumni here. Great night. Thank you, everyone. But I will keep it moving. We'll move on to action item 12, which is several personnel items. Is there a motion and a second?
Second.
Any comments or questions? Just wanted to thank the administration for the previous review of the clubs and the way we did that, streamlining that. And I'm glad to be approving the advisors. I was going to list some of the clubs, but I figured I would not. But there's such a diversity of clubs and offerings to these kids to keep them engaged, and at all three levels, which I thought was really important that we're approving advisors for it, high school, middle school, and the elementary school. Any other comments?
More than one resolution right now?
Personnel, so it's 12A through G.
Sorry about that. Okay, I might.
Get the motion. Did I even take a motion on that?
Gotcha.
Did I take a motion to open discussion, Betty? Did I? It just happened. I've already forgotten. Thank you. Great.
I even seconded it. I just didn't
Okay.
catch that.
Sorry, no, I apologize.
Well,
It's 12A through G.
yeah, thank you.
Any other comments or questions? All in favor? Aye, thank you. I'd like to take action 13, acceptance of a donation from the North Shore High School PTO to 4 different classes. Is there a motion? And I heard a second as well. Comments or questions? Just we really are appreciative of any donation, and the high school PTO is doing a great job. All in favor? Aye, thank you. Action 14, disposal of sundry inventory items. Is there a motion? And a second? Comments? Call the vote. All in favor? Aye. Action 15, which is the appointment of the Board of Registration for the 2023 annual budget vote and election of trustees. Is there a motion? And a second? Thank you. Comments, questions? All. They absolutely do. Do a great job. All in favor? Aye. Action 16A and B, approval of 2 contracts. Is there a motion? Thank you. I heard Richard was first, but I got 2 over there. Comments or questions? In favor? Aye. Action 17, which is the approval of a special ed tuition agreement with the Summit School. Is there a motion? I heard a second. Comments or questions? All in favor? Aye. I'm gonna lump action 18 and 19 together. Is there a motion on 18 and 19, which are special education consultant and services? Thank you, Marion. Second. Thank you, Andrea. Comments or questions on 18 and 19? All in favor? Aye. That's our business. We'll move on to old business. There is one bullet pointed item, which is a stop arm camera program revisitation, which I'll say nothing, but I'll hand it over to Chris.
Thank you. So we started to talk about this at our last meeting. Possible contract with Bus Patrol. That is a company that's providing the cameras that catch passerbyers when the stop sign is out. They also offer inside cameras, which is newer news. One update on this that we learned yesterday, actually from our lobbyist, is that there is an issue with the town of Hempstead and the town of Oyster Bay, and apparently they're not working yet in the town of Oyster Bay. So I think Jamie, Mr. Pappas's recommendation and mine would be to wait a little longer till we get more clarity on that.
Exactly. I think even the contract that we were considering or talking about talked of the town of Hempstead and not necessarily town of North Hempstead and Oyster Bay. They were doing it through the town of Hempstead, but there's been negotiation and talking with Nassau County and both the town of Oyster Bay and the town of North Hempstead. So there will be a more permanent or a possible change to that contract. So
The county, it's a countywide program, but it's implemented by the towns.
in Suffolk County, it was implemented by the county themselves. So every school district in Suffolk County, but in Nassau County, there were two different vendors, I believe, and there's been some negotiation, but currently Bus Patrol has maybe the largest number or the only one that is currently doing it in Nassau County. However, have been talks and between the towns and the county, they're still going on. So
Apologize for not giving that in backup, but it really was like at the 11th hour last night when we learned this, and we'll do more research and continue to update you. Yeah. Sorry, this
So
has
we don't
become
know
a-
where this leaves us then, basically.
Yeah, I think we recommend slowing it down until we get more information.
Too bad. It's disappointing because I think it's, it's something that would be beneficial. I'm surprised.
I think our next step will be to reach out to the company directly and see if, we get information. Is this an issue from their lens, and perhaps town of Oyster Bay also.
I wonder why, I was just gonna say, I wonder why in Suffolk they can do it countywide, but in Nassau, it's
I think
with the
right
town.
now the issue is that in Suffolk County, all of the who is going to receive the benefit of the fines. And in Suffolk County was receiving them, and that's how it was all structured. In Nassau County, I believe there's a split between what the town gets, what the different towns get, and what the county gets, if the county gets anything or all. And that is kind of what they're discussing. I think there was an agreement with Hempstead, but nothing with Oyster Bay or North Hempstead. So that's,
I guess our fear is, and it's it could be, it might not come to fruition, but that we put the equipment on, and then because of this situation, we have to end up taking it off, and we just want to avoid that.
we're not going to go with that particular vendor. We're going to pick a different vendor on the county side. And now we have equipment that isn't supported by whoever the new vendor is.
Technologies can change. I think it's important to let the public know that the benefit is increased safety as a deterrent for people to pass stopped school buses, and the kiddies who are entering and crossing are certainly safer from that, which is an absolute benefit. The other benefit is that they install these on our buses for free, and they give us nice new equipment. But it should be noted, of course, that whether it's the towns of Oyster Bay and Hempstead or the county of Nassau or the county of Suffolk, under no situation are the school districts receiving any of the money from the fines. And that's an issue beyond us. So full disclosure, that's just the way it's been constructed. Yeah, please.
So assuming that this is not going to happen anytime soon, I wonder if there's some other type of education or initiative that we can do to assist people who are concerned about their children's safety when they're waiting for the bus and getting off the bus. I don't know what that would be. Maybe it's just a communication to the community, asking for people to be mindful of this. Sometimes I think it's just education, because if you're talking about Glen Cove Road, a lot of people don't realize they're supposed to stop with the school bus if there's this multi-lane, you know, situation. So perhaps, I mean, I don't know how impactful it would be, but at least maybe it's something that we can disseminate.
It's interesting. I think there are a couple of issues like this. That's certainly a huge one. Also, the cross street issue that Dr. O'Hara, me, and Mr. Glennon are working, our security director are working on. I think that could use some messaging too. So I think this is a quadrant of our work that we need to message on. So we will work on that.
Thank you. Other old business folks may have? Just had one thing that I wanted to bring up, which was in the, Howard, you're getting a lot of props tonight, but they're well earned. You're back up on the civics coordinator. I thought was interesting. People talk about civics, there's a lot of false narratives that we don't teach civics, we don't emphasize civics. Of course we do. It goes beyond just saying the pledge. I'm just going to keep moving on what that beeping is. But I was intrigued by that position of the civics coordinator. If you could tell us a little bit about what that person does, just so people can understand what their role is and how we emphasize that part of the educational program for our kids.
Absolutely. So Mr. Gordon worked to bring the seal of civic readiness to North Shore, which is a wonderful opportunity for our students for a few reasons. One, it will encourage them to engage in these opportunities, but it will also recognize and acknowledge the work that they're doing. So for example, that seal can be put on their transcripts and make them stand out on their applications. So we applied to the state to be able to provide this program for our students. So Mr. Gordon worked with his teachers, and part of one of the teachers' teaching loads will be to be the coordinator of that program. So that'll be Ms. Chamari, who's done a wonderful job creating the program. So what the students need to do to obtain the seal is twofold. One, they have to demonstrate their knowledge of civics, but then also their participation in that. And they can do that in a variety of ways. So Ms. Chamari, with Mr. Gordon, has worked to create a menu of possibilities for kids. So in that position, she'll kind of help to organize the students' work towards the seal, but she'll also work to find opportunities for the students. One of the pieces of the program, they've developed capstone projects, so she's worked in the design and coordination of those. So through that position, it'll be a logistical piece, but also enhancing the amount and the quality of the opportunities the kids have to do work related to civics.
I think that's a whole new track of opportunities. Students who are applying to work in criminal justice, students who are applying to potentially attend service academies. That would be, forget about the intrinsic value of the education they're getting, which is of course the whole point of what we're doing. They're learning along the way. As an outcome, a seal counts. So I appreciated that, and I wanted to have it highlighted. So I thank you so much. Any other old business?
Because you put this there, maybe what I want to talk about is old business. So I don't know.
Yeah, I wasn't going to say it, but yeah, mine was probably maybe new business.
Okay, well,
but
I
sure.
can wait.
Okay. So we will move on to new business. And that sounds like you, Lisa.
I just have a couple points, which is I had the privilege of going to the alumni presentation, and I actually brought, in case anybody's interested, I just really want to thank the athletic department for all the work that went in to review all the applications and the beautiful presentation with all the families. It was a joy to actually be there with my first ever going. And I'm so happy that I went. The accomplishments of these athletes were so staggering. And as one of our public commenters who may or may not have had one of their offspring, I don't know. I don't want to embarrass anybody, but said, in particular, the group of the winningness of the running program during this group of athletes when they were there. If you have a minute, I brought this in case anybody wants to read. It's staggering, like national record holders and the accomplishments that just kept rolling. So I really just wanted to take a minute to acknowledge that. And, I'm so proud that we will have them on our walls. And it's my first, so it's the only one that I can really acknowledge. And also this beautiful book. I wanted to congratulate the team that put it together, the high school PTO. I don't know if I'm allowed to mention people by name, but and the boosters who are benefiting from this. I brought one in case anybody didn't have a chance to look it over, but I think that they just did a tremendous job. And I will mention one person by name, which is Shelley. I thought you did your energy the whole entire day and your enthusiasm, even at the induction ceremony, she just was so obviously thrilled to have seen kids that she saw grow up here, come back, and it was very infectious. And I was really just really impressed. And also, and you mentioned them, the facilities crew. I was there at 10 a.m. when they started putting the carnival together, and I happened to leave the football game and I couldn't believe how quickly it was like, what carnival? They worked so hard all day to make it great. All the volunteers, but it was really, let me make sure I had a list of the people that I really wanted to thank, but I thought that they just did. The custodial crew really blew the doors off and made it fun and engaging, and they were part of it, which I thought was really great. So I just really want to just take a second. I know you already mentioned them in your comments, Dr. Leonis, but I want to take a second for acknowledging them because I thought it could not have gone better. And then the only other thing I want to mention is, in case anybody's still watching, part of being a trustee is mandatory state training, and I will be doing that tomorrow, and I will be doing that Saturday. So I'm very encouraged to go into our retreat on Sunday with a very fresh head full of being a board member. I just want to share that.
Terrific. I appreciate that. That was a great shout outs to the folks that put this together. The physical putting it together, the homecoming journal was excellent. I was at the Booster Club. They mentioned they had to add a bunch more pages in the original printing to get everything in there. It was a team effort, although certainly spearheaded by a couple of extremely hardworking individuals, and just another component of a great day. Other new business?
Have something
Sure.
actually inspired by Jamie's weekly update. You talked about these New York class accounts. It sounds really excellent. And I'm wondering what the next step can or should be. It sounds like, they'll send a representative, and then, if we want that, I think we should be investigating it. It seems great.
It's something that had been around for a while and kind of was quiet. Now it's been revived. They're growing their assets and other things, but it's a cooperative of municipalities that put all their money together, and they're getting rates very close to what a CD would be. Although it's not tied up for a period of time. You could take the money out and in the same day if you needed it. So it's a great program. The next thing would be a resolution to add them as one of the financial institutions that we can do business with.
Can I ask you a question on that? So we're very careful about putting our accounts in multiple banks and limiting the amount so that it's federally insured. When you pool the assets that way and you're getting the greater interest rate because they're now a large bundle of money, what does that do for federally insured? I would assume that's not a federally insured product.
Oh, they will those items that are in banks will be covered up to the FDIC, but those that are over will, in a similar fashion to our current banks, if we put a certain amount of money in the bank that's over the FDIC coverage, they're covered with letters of credit or holding assets to cover those deposits. So they're collateralized in a similar way to any one of our other financial institutions.
So there wouldn't be a loss because when you're talking about something like that, we're always very careful because there are parameters on public monies, how you invest them. So if there was a bank collapse and they were, just for argument's sake, say $5 million and $1 million of it was ours. that $1 million would have some sort of backing?
The same fashion that our banks, but even we have in excess of FDIC coverage. I mean, deposits in our own banks in excess of the
Yes, we
FDIC
do,
coverage.
but we're careful about moving a lot of the money that it's in. That's why there are multiple accounts in the treasurer's report.
Yes, but the total, I agree, and they cover it with collateral in the same fashion that our banks would.
Pro risk is certainly what we have to be doing here. Any other question? Any other new business before we adjourn? All right, motion to adjourn. All right, all in favor? Let's do it. Take care. Good night, everyone. Thank you.
Good night.